Welcome back to another edition of Between Two Fars. I'm Warneke Miller, and I'm joined today by Ted Rowe. He's the Chief Counsel in the Office of General Counsel for Johnson Space Center, and he's been walking us through what's been happening at NASA these last couple of decades. Today, we're going to drill down into the root causes for this transformation for how we've been doing business. Ted, can you help us understand the why behind what we see going on today?
Certainly. I'm going to share my screen here because I do have a slide to help us walk through this process. Okay, thanks, Warneke. So let's talk about what's fueling this transformation that's been occurring since the mid-2000s. It's really certain external environmental factors that are changing how NASA became so successful, and it's bringing into a focus that old adage, what got you here won't necessarily get you there. In general, I believe we can categorize these external environmental factors into four primary categories. There's the political, there's the technological, there's the economic, and then there's the mission. So let's just go over some examples within these four broad categories. In terms of political, I threw in the federal budget because the federal budget, the way the federal budget is appropriated every year, it's very much a political activity. There's been a significant trend in the federal budget that really started to occur in the 1990s, where for many, many years, mandatory spending and discretionary spending was pretty much equal in terms of percentage of the federal budget. And in the 1990s, this started to diverge. Mandatory spending started to eat up more and more as a percentage of the federal budget, and discretionary spending consequently became less and less as a percentage of the federal budget. So here's a graph that shows that. This is from the Congressional Budget Office. You can see that in the 90s, you start to see this divergence where, pretty much the steady state, if you will, is roughly 2/3 mandatory and 1/3 discretionary. NASA's clearly in the discretionary portion of the federal budget, and we're competing with other discretionary appropriations such as Department of Defense. Department of Defense is in discretionary as well, and that eats up a big chunk of the discretionary budget. So there's basically less and less available for NASA, and we have to understand that context because I think a lot of people don't realize that this divergence has occurred and it's reached pretty much a steady state. In fact, it may get worse. In 2021, the percentage of discretionary portion of the federal budget was 24%. So it decreased from 1/3 to 1/4 for 2021. We got to see if this is just this more of a one-time thing or whether this is actually a trend that's going to stabilize between the 3/4, 1/4 split versus the 2/3, 1/3 split. So that's why there's a lot of budgetary pressure at NASA, and we see that in the mission support organizations as well, but that's where that's coming from. So another I guess, driver of this transformation deals with the mission. NASA's missions are becoming increasingly more complex. The duration is increasing, and that leads to more expensive human space exploration missions. And so
Now,
that's going to have impacts.
When you're talking about the increasing complexity, are you talking about the missions that we're looking forward to, or are you talking about the current missions back and forth to the International Space Station are growing more complex?
No, I'm talking about the future missions going to the moon, lunar surface operations, eventually to Mars. We're talking about increasingly complex missions, yes, longer durations, and it's going to get more expensive rather than get cheaper. So, you take these two first dynamics in the context. We don't have as much money. What we need to do, what we aspire to do is costing more money. So, obviously you got an issue as to why NASA needs to transform. Technological, there's been a big change in, the exponential rate and pace of science and technological development. It's been exponential in many fields. It's not just information technology anymore. It has bleeded over to biotechnology. It has bleeded over to robotics and automation. It has bleeded over even to space technology. And here's a graph that kind of shows that accelerated growth in technology since the 1400s, and it started to take place really in this century, and now it's just going off the charts. So technological development is increasing at an exponential pace. We see that in terms of just microcosm in terms of what SpaceX is doing. And you compare and contrast that to the rate of technology development at NASA. For various reasons, NASA cannot compete with that rate of technological change. So NASA needs to change and do something about that, or else it's going to be left behind. And then finally, it's the economic, it's the availability of commercial services and capabilities that were previously exclusively provided by for NASA. We talked in the last episode how, when NASA was first formed in the late 50s, there was no human spaceflight, exploration. It was a dream, and NASA had to create everything from scratch and very quickly. So NASA was the only game in town.
But the concept of commercial services is sort of built into our DNA, though, isn't it? From our earliest days, didn't we have a vision of launching commercial abilities for this type of space flight and exploration?
Yes, that was more a vision than actual reality, though, because in essence, NASA being the only game in town pretty much was the norm from the late 50s until the mid 2000s, when you think about it. When you think about shuttle and all the things that shuttle was supposed to bring, it never came out of fruition. Shuttle never delivered what it was supposed to deliver based on us selling what shuttle could be. And only now do we see true commercial resupply and commercial crew transportation. Shuttle did not provide that. And so the reality is this paradigm that NASA was the only game in town lasted for over 50 years. And some would say in pockets, it still exists today. So going on 60 plus years, NASA being the only game in town rather than the exception. But that's changing now. And that has started to change in the mid 2000s. So just an example, here's a chart on investments since the 2000s. Another exponential trend. This is investments in space, in the space companies. And so we can see that the data, doesn't lie. There's been an exponential growth in commercial space. That growth has permeated into human exploration, which, it was there in commercial satellites for a long time. And commercial satellites still represents the biggest chunk in terms of, the space business. What constitutes, the space economy is still dominated by satellites. However, the trend that's noticeable is that there's been an increase in investments in what we would, historically called human or relate to human space exploration. So that's the driving factors. Again, as just to recap, it's the political, it's the technological, it's the economic, and it's the mission. And all those factors are driving NASA to transform the way it does business. What got us to be successful won't get us to be successful in the future because of these external environmental factors.
Excellent. And I like the way we were talking about the hope of being able to do this exploration with the technology, but also from our very roots, the hope that we would have a commercial industry, that NASA wouldn't be the only game in town, and yet we have fallen short of that for many, many decades. However, I want to talk about that transformation that took place in the last 25 years and the long haul that we've been going through to try to seed this new industry, and some of the changes that we've had to endure with the way we do business in order to develop this commercial industry, or at least do our part to encourage it. Do you think you could come back again next time and talk to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Next
Yep.
episode, we're going to talk about the consequences of this transformation as it relates to the procurement core legal function.
Excellent. Join us back here again next time on Between Two FARs.